Hi everybody, I'm Bill Sanders and this is Watch AHCI, the art and science of watch collection. Today what I want to talk about are how we can get our mitts on some watches by some top watchmakers. The problem with top watchmakers are prices are the tops too. One of my favorite watchmakers is a guy named Bernard Lederer. There's something about his watches and that I really like. This is one from the Grand Prix d'Horloge de Genève from 2021. That one was called the Innovation Prize. And he does some wondrous things with escapements. Here you can see at the bottom down there, there's something going on that looks really interesting. But this thing's 137,850 Swiss francs. And so what I wanted to find was something that would be by Bernard Lederer, but not so expensive. Now, so I started looking around and I found this. There was a thing that he had. I'm not sure, it could be still, but he was making watches through this company identified as Bernard Lederer Universe. And I found lots of interesting watches they're not cheap. Some of them are really good prices, but other ones are within reach, I'll put it that way, are worth saving for. For example, this Blue Duet. Now, this thing was listed as 88.60 in euro, and but I found prices really between about 2,700 and 12,000, and I'm still looking for them. But they do different. They're really interesting setups. They do different things. One of my favorite is the Blue Quintet. Over on the right side, there is a retrograde month. And then over about 10 o'clock, they have the day. The one at the bottom, blue, I call it blue, BLU, from Bernard Lederer Universe. The dial is the little dial, the sub-dial there, is the minute hand, and then it goes around, and the little dot at the top of the sub-dial hits all the different hours. I mean, now here's the other thing. Now, most of these movements in these watches are ETAs, or something like that. But then the watchmaker puts something on them that makes them not the same. All right, they really add something to them. Now, again, what I did, I went to the AHCI, which is the independent watchmakers. They're the top guys in the business. There's some other ones who are also tops who aren't in AHCI, and I'll mention them too. But now, Sven Anderson, I think I've probably talked about him before, and just recently he came out with this watch called Jumping Hours 40th anniversary in platinum. This is 41,000 Swiss francs. Again, this is at least out of my range. But, you know, really just sort of a very interesting watch. Jumping hours up at 12 o'clock. And then the sub-dial is in minutes. And you can see in the back a very interesting design, a motif on the rotor. Really an interesting watch. But like I said, this is something you can't afford. By the way, too, Sven Anderson was one of the two I guess, original people who started the AHCI, because they wanted to get with independent watchmakers and say, look, guys, you know, let's get together and see what we can do. Now, again, like Bernard Lederer, I was able to find some other ones that were from, a lot of these are some just really great stuff was going about the first decade of the 21st century, between 2000 and 2010. Other ones go back into the 90s, some even perhaps back into the 80s. One of the ones that was done by Sven Anderson is called the Goldsfeld Seven Masters, and there were a number of different really top watchmakers who each one of these seven masters did a different one, and this is the one that Sven Anderson did. Now, there was this one that Christopher Columbus is a world timer, and I looked at that watch for years, and I noticed that recently the price has just shot way up. I mean, you used to be able to find those maybe $3,000 or $4,000, and now they're way up there. Another one, Orbita Luna, that's from 2005. That's another interesting watch. It's got it looks like it's got a 20, it's got around the end, it's got a calendar, 31-day calendar, and then the hours and minutes hand. Down at the bottom, it's perpetual secular calendar. That's from 1996. By the way, too, something else in these older watches, there's a lot of gold, because the gold prices now, I think, are over like $2,000 an ounce. Back then, they were like $200 an ounce. So there's been a big change in that. So that's another thing that you might want to look at. This is here's the thing about these watches. They're unique. They're not your typical watches. And if you like typical watches, there are plenty of those around, and you can go get these. But if you want something by one of the top watchmakers, you can find it in these. Now, this next one is another guy I like, Antoine Prezuzio. This watch that he has, called the TTR 3 Blue Equalizer frequencies, got triple tourbillon, 1,200,000 Swiss francs. This particular one, he only made one of those, so that's. But what a watch! Just gorgeous watch. By the way, too, most of these that we're going to look at, they're 3 hertz, 21,600 semi-oscillations per hour. Okay, this is really an amazing watch, but fortunately, if we look around, we can find some really good ones, some very inexpensive ones, relatively speaking, either new or, again, from the first part of the 21st century. Now, both Prezuzio and Sven Anderson did a lot of erotica in their watches. On the back, they'll have a automata with some couple having sex and things like that. This one called Hours of Love is, if you like that kind of stuff or you find it interesting, and it's interesting from a horological point of view, but I mean, it's sort of something that, I don't know, I feel sort of funny with one, but that's me. Called Hours of Love. Then you flip it over and there's a couple going at it. Now, but most of all the watches, they figure, oh, this will be fun. I'm going to put it in some automata and do something like that. But here's some other ones. The Chronogran Robusto is a chronograph, and it's an interesting one. I mean, there's different styles. This particular dial is really different, and it's very interesting. They run between $4,000 and $5,000, and again, you're getting a guy who's won 2 Grand Prix awards and have had a number of other ones who are in the finalists. One watch I really like is called a Transworld. Now, the one I'm showing there is brand new, and I think they're between, I don't know, $5,000, $6,000, somewhere in that neighborhood. But again, a very interesting watch. Ones you can find, there's one I found, the Sienna, between about $2,000 and $5,000, depending on color and different things like that. It's sort of again, a very interesting looking watch, a gold watch. That's another nice thing about it. Another one I found was called the Power Reserve HW. Really interesting fonts on this watch. And then it's got a Power Reserve just below the 12 o'clock and a sub-dial down at the bottom. But again, you can find, you know, this is one of these, all of these people we looked at are AHCI members. Now, sort of to wrap things up, I guess, is more of a thing say, look around. You know, if you like you're saving up for something that everybody buys and they make a million of them, that's okay too. I mean, we all should like what we like, but if you're really interested in some of these top watchmakers, you can find some interesting watches. Another guy, another AHCI member's name is Paul Gerber. I've always liked his triple rotor. He's got on the back of his watch, this one is the name of this particular model is called the triple rotor. And that thing's only about $5,000 new, but an interesting watch. It's put on top of an ETA or something like that. Just, I don't know, very likable watch. There's got some other ones I like too. A Premier Retrograde by Daniel Roth. Now, Daniel Roth was the guy who sort of rebuilt Breguet back in, I think it was in the 80s, that Breguet was down to some couple watches they hoped to sell the military, and the Chaumet brothers bought them, and they hired Daniel Roth and some other top people. Totally turned around Breguet, and a lot of the models you see today were done by Daniel Roth. Well, the Chaumet brothers, when they went broke, Daniel Roth decided to go out on his own. Again, this is, I think it's late 90s and the early 2000s. He had a company called Daniel Roth, and again, made some really interesting watches. The one there is the Premier Retrograde, and one I'd very much like to have myself. Very different, very unusual, very interesting watch. Down at the bottom is one that I have, actually. It's by Roger Dubuis. Roger Dubuis is another tip-top watchmaker, but his watches today are out of sight. They, just about all of them, if not all of them, most of them have the Geneva seal. There's some that don't have the Geneva seal. And they have a movement called the RD14. It's one by Roger Dubuis. It's a great movement on this. I had really good luck with it. I got another one. This is also Roger Dubuis, Geneva seal. These were really good price, I'll put it that way. And I hate to mention a price because prices will, whoop, whoop, they're all over the place. And so... Now, another one, I've talked about this one before, too. I have one called the Chaumet Dandy Arty Open Face. And on mine, you can see these gears, these Agoness gears, and this slow Ferris wheel going around. And the gears are by Jean-Marc Wiederreck, who his watches have been winning, watches that he had parts or movements in, have been winning GPHG awards for years. One of the most respected watchmakers in Switzerland. Great guy. And this watch, I know with a name like Dandy Arty, but I saw one like that for around $2,000. Now, the thing of it is what they've done is that they have what's called an eccentric second, which is most of us would call a small second over on the right there. But the distance between the main gear train and the eccentric seconds, the further all the way, you start getting these things that jump. And so this is when Jean-Marc Wiederreck put in these Agonese gears with the little springs in the teeth. Amazing. And so being able to get something like that for about a couple $1,000. Let me tell you, Chaumet is a hugely important jeweler in France. They have a history to them. They made the sword hilt for Napoleon. I mean, they're really something. And their cases are just fantastic. They're very deep. I mean, something you don't see in your everyday watch. Patent leather strap on it. Very formal watch, but more fun. I love that watch. Anyway, so this is what sort of this is really as much as anything else. is trying to find watches that are more affordable. You look at that are better. I would much rather have, and I'm not saying this to offend anybody, so I won't mention any brands, but I'd rather have an Easy Diver with a a Geneva seal with a Roger Dubuis RD14 than any of the dive watches that I know of. This is an incredibly good watch. And plus, as again, you buy a top watchmaker. That's the way I look at things. Now, that's not for everybody. I know that, saying, oh, all the guys are getting this watch, so I'm going to get that. That's fine if you're that way. Now, but if you're looking for something where you can find a good buy by a top watchmaker, these are some ideas that you might follow up. Let me know what you think if you have something like this, or you can suggest, say, hey, I know another top watchmaker, and he's got some watches that he's done that are affordable. Let me know. I'd like to hear from you. It's an opportunity to subscribe if you'd like. And until next time, this is Bill Sanders for AHCI, the art and science of watch collection.